Hi, do you know which phone is #1 on the DxOMark website right now? Is it the iPhone 15 Pro Max, Samsung S23 Ultra, Xperia 1 Mark V, or the Huawei P60 Pro with its amazing camera? I want to talk about the camera because I care a lot about taking pictures and videos. I want to see if this phone is good for me or not. I hope I can answer your questions. I'll tell you the price a bit later because it's important for deciding. But before I appreciate if you like and subscribe. The camera phone from Huawei this year is the P60 Pro. It's good not only for taking pictures but also in many other areas. It's a high-quality phone, but it's not perfect. A big problem is that it doesn't have Google services. Instead of Google Search, it has Pedal Search, and instead of Google Maps, it has Pedal Maps. These apps are not very easy to use. Also, using Huawei phones can be a bit tricky. For example, when I tried to take photos and videos, it took me almost 2 hours just to install 2 games and a few apps. But to be fair, the user interface of the P60 Pro, which is EMUI 13.1, works very smoothly and is really good, just like always. This phone is also based on Android 12. I should mention that there are no problems with using Iranian apps on this phone. The reviewers I talked to said they had no issues installing benchmark apps, and games also ran fine. I'll give you more detailed results later. For easier downloading of apps, you can use websites and stores like APK Pure. If you need Google apps, you'll have to use their web versions, which aren't very fun to use. Let's stop talking about the user interface and get to the main point. The camera software. The camera software isn't very complicated. It gives you all the features you need in a simple and standard design. Unlike Sony Xperia phones, which have lots of complex features, everything here is easy to use. The P60 Pro has 3 cameras, and the main camera has a 48-megapixel sensor. The cool thing is that you can change the lens aperture between f1.4 and f4. The aperture is so big that you can clearly see the difference when you change it. To do this, you need to switch the camera mode from Auto to Pro, manual. Then, you can manually open or close the aperture in 10 steps. So, what's the purpose of this feature? In the Pro mode, you can make the subject and background of your photos look more professional. You can add depth to your photo or blur the background. But remember, the sensor is small, so the results should be compared with other mobile phones, not professional cameras. The bokeh effect and portrait mode, which blur the background a lot, are done by software. But with the Pro mode, the aperture changes mechanically, which is pretty impressive for a mobile camera. The main camera takes very good photos. It's almost on the same level as the iPhone 15 Pro Max. It captures details in both dark and bright areas very well. In outdoor environments where the light is perfect for photos, the P60 Pro captures high details, and the colors look really nice. Taking photos in the dark is something Huawei has really focused on, and the P60 Pro does a good job in this area. The photos might have a slight yellow tint, but the phone captures details and textures very well, even in shadows. The main camera, which I mentioned is quite large, really stands out on the back of the phone. However, the big camera isn't the only thing that catches your eye on the back of the phone, especially in the model we're reviewing. The back of this model is the most unique part of the P60 Pro, and it's different from the other colors like purple and green, which look simpler. What's interesting is that Huawei says the pearl-like design on the back of each model is unique. If you buy this phone, the back design will be unique compared to other P60 Pro phones. The special design is not just for looks, it's practical too. It doesn't easily get dirty, and fingerprints are not visible on it. So your phone always looks clean. However, this doesn't apply to the phone's frame, which is metal and shows fingerprints and smudges. But because the screen curves a bit, the frame is relatively narrow, so you won't notice fingerprints unless you look closely. As for the cameras, it's worth mentioning that the main camera also has optical image stabilization. The phone's image stabilization helps reduce handshake, but it doesn't have the advanced stabilization mode found in many flagship phones, like the iPhone 15 Pro Max and Samsung S23 Ultra. If your hand shakes a lot while recording, the phone might not stabilize the video as well as those other phones. The second camera is a telephoto lens with a 48-megapixel sensor, useful for taking photos of distant subjects. With this camera, you can zoom in up to 3.5 times optically. When you take a photo with 3.5x zoom, the P60 Pro maintains good detail and delivers a high-quality image. To be precise, the 3.5x zoom of the P60 Pro is a bit less than the 5x zoom of the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The telephoto camera also has sensor shift optical image stabilization, which moves the sensor to reduce shake when your hand is unsteady. This helps stabilize your photos, especially with the telephoto lens. The telephoto camera works well for macro photography too, so you don't need to get extremely close to the subject. It works well from about 15 centimeters away. The next camera is an ultra-wide lens with a 13-megapixel sensor, which is useful for capturing more of the scene when you need a wider view in your photos. The ultra-wide camera on the P60 Pro might not impress you as much. Whether it's day or night, the details in the final photos can be lacking. The ultra-wide camera creates a fisheye effect, causing some distortion at the edges of the photo, and the P60 Pro can't correct this distortion as well as the iPhone 15 Pro Max. The P60 Pro also has a 13-megapixel selfie camera. The selfies taken with this camera are acceptable and not bad. All the cameras on the phone, including the selfie camera, can record 4K videos. Everything looks good so far. Let's talk about the hardware now. Inside the phone is a Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chipset, which is an upgraded version of last year's chip and is overclocked for better performance. One surprising thing is that it doesn't support 5G. It uses a 4G modem instead. As for the price, you can check it on the ZoomIt website. Search for P60 Pro or Huawei products there, and you'll find a list of sellers sorted by price. It's around $1,000. You can compare this phone with other Huawei phones on their product page. Check the price and buy from the site with the best deal. The price is around $1,000, and keep in mind that it doesn't support 5G. The user interface is also a factor to consider, so the final decision is up to you. Regarding the CPU, it's about 10% weaker compared to the Gen 2 chip, but it's not much weaker overall. Performance is generally smooth and good, which is typical for Huawei phones. The phone does get warm, and it can get as hot as the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which might make it uncomfortable to hold. If you play games on your phone, you should know that Genshin Impact can run smoothly at 50 frames per second with medium graphics settings. I forgot to mention the display. The P60 Pro has a 6.6-inch OLED screen with a 120 Hz refresh rate and a resolution of 1220 by 2700 pixels. The screen is very clear and sharp. It also uses an LTPO panel, which means the refresh rate can adjust between 1 Hz and 120 Hz based on your usage, helping to save battery. About the battery. It has a 4,815 mAh capacity and comes with an 88-watt charger in the box. The phone supports 50-watt wireless charging as well. The battery performance is quite good. It can provide around 14 hours of screen time with regular use, which is close to 2 full days of use if you keep the brightness around the middle level. If you set the screen brightness to the maximum, it reaches about 690 nits, which is good for indoor use. In automatic mode, if you're in direct sunlight, the brightness can go up to 1,300 nits, which is excellent. I've covered everything about the P60 Pro. The Huawei phone is a well-rounded smartphone that excels in many areas. However, its major drawbacks are the lack of Google services and software issues. For an average phone, these might not be a big deal, but for a premium flagship costing around 63 million Toman, it reduces its value. The biggest strength of the P60 Pro is its camera, which in many scenarios matches or even exceeds the performance of the iPhone 15 Pro Max and S23 Ultra. In the end, It's up to you to decide how much you value a complete and excellent package without Google services. That's all for the review of the Huawei P60 Pro. Thank you for watching the video. Please leave your comments below, and we'll try to answer all of them. If you're looking for a phone with an amazing camera, check out our other video where we compared this phone with the iPhone and Samsung models we had. It's available here. Thanks again, and as Behzad says, stay safe and successful.